Welcome to the Vet Farm Network podcast, a place where we explore how to build profitable, successful, and rewarding lives in agriculture for military veterans and their families. Today's guest is John Klar, a farmer, author, and food freedom advocate from Vermont, a state with a long agricultural history rooted in small farms and local food systems. Since the earliest days of the United States, farmers have played a vital role in their communities, shaping both the land and civic life. John carries on that tradition with decades of hands-on experience raising sheep and beef cattle using pasture-based systems. In addition to his work on the farm, John is the author of Small Farm Republic and a strong advocate of the right to farm movement. Through his writing and public commentary, he digs into the real-world challenges facing family farms today, drawing on lived experience and a clear understanding of how policy, economics, and on-the-ground decisions affect farm viability and resilience. We're pleased to share that John will be a featured speaker at the Veterans in Farming Indiana State Meeting taking place March 28th, 2026 at the Sheraton Indianapolis City Center Hotel in downtown Indy. Now in its third year, the Indiana State Meeting is a full-day, in-person conference designed to support veterans and their families at every stage of the agricultural journey, from those just getting started to experienced producers looking to expand or diversify their operation. The conference includes short format morning sessions, in-depth interactive afternoon workshops, networking, lunch, and a vendor expo. Sessions topics range from regenerative agriculture and permaculture to USDA and NRCS resources, business and grant planning, gardening, beekeeping, forest and woodlot management, food preservation, and more. The event is open to veterans, military families, first responders, and members of the broader agricultural community. You don't need to be a veteran to join us. Thanks to generous support, veterans and one caregiver can attend for just $20. That includes the meals, and children under 16 can also attend for free. You can learn more and register at vetsinfarming.com. With that, let's get into today's conversation with John Klar. John, congratulations on your recent appointment by Secretary Rollins to serve on the Vermont USDA Farm Service Agency State Committee.
Well, thank you. I was just got an email about that. I'm trying to learn what I got to do, but that's why I did it, so I can learn more and support our farmers. More and more as I get older, I've sold off a lot of my animals because I either have to farm or I have to help other people farm, and I'm hitting my golden years. I only have like 30 more years to do this. So that's why I'm really excited to attend the event. And my daughter's in the Guard, and my dad was a U.S. Marine. But especially in these times, I really think we need to support our law enforcement and our veterans. So I get really excited when they overlap, and I can help work to support veterans and farmers.
So you've spent decades working in agriculture in a variety of ways. What kind of first drew you into farming, and how have you made it work with your wife Jackie over the years, even without owning land?
Well, and we did own land. We initially, so I mean, it's a long story. That's why Small Farm Republic is a great read. It tells it, but just a little plug there. And my next book coming out in March 17th with Skyhorse Publishing is called The Coming Food Crisis, because it talks about how monetary policy itself can impact food prices, even without the other problems we have with rising input costs. And that's becoming a pretty current issue. But for me, I grew up around farms. I'm seventh generation on this hill here in Brookfield, Vermont. A lot of my great uncles and others were dairy farmers. My grandfather was a dairy farmer, but he had phased out of it by the 50s, actually probably the late 40s. He still dabbled. But it was sheep originally. Vermont was as you know, the history of Vermont, that's what a lot of farms were. And they were all really sufficiency farms. We weren't really even exporting a lot to other states. And then Vermont started to provide food to Boston and other cities. And so what happened with me was I was practicing law. Now maybe people will quit this interview because they find out I'm a lawyer. So you didn't point that out, I don't think. But I have a background in tax law and finance, which becomes very important when we're looking at the regulatory structures and the markets that are destroying small farms. And what happened for me was I can't claim any real idyllic desire to become a farmer. I got really sick with Lyme disease. And many people in the Maha movement, which I work with, have similar stories that we didn't, we don't really claim great credit and pat ourselves on the back. We got really, really sick. And we learned that wholesome food was very much part of our cure. and that sometimes toxic food was perhaps partly contributing to our illnesses. And so when I got sick, I had to close my law practice. I could barely walk. I was 34. I was very healthy. I hadn't even been to a doctor for a physical or anything in over a decade. And I deteriorated very quickly with the Lyme disease. And so after years of antibiotics, I moved to healthier food. But in the meantime, I sold my building and law practice and moved to Vermont and bought a 130 acre, really turned out to be a 160 acre dairy farm and started raising stuff. And I learned from the farmers. And so I learned how to make hay, and we started raising cows and draft horses and sheep and pigs. And we built a certified inspected cheese house. So we had actually a milking parlor that I constructed and complied with all the laws, and all organic and all unpasteurized. I still drink raw milk almost every day when I take the time to go get it from my farmer. And so we just learn by doing. That's how I've learned a lot of things in life. And I want to point out to people, and a lot of people may not understand this, but we look at the monetary aspect of farming. How do I make a living? But we measure too many things by money alone. And I can say now in hindsight, I didn't do it for that reason, but that was the best thing I could have ever done for my children. My three children was to raise them on a farm. They work 7 days a week without pay in arduous work. They learn where their food comes from. They eat well. I mean, they are so well off now in life and set up for life in its adversity because they haven't been raised up to be soft and complaining and getting paid and weekends off and all that. Everything's easy for them now because farming was hard, and they all loved it. And so I don't know how to put a price on that, and I don't know how to put a price on the raising your own food and not going to a grocery store for a whole month because you have all your food and you go there to get oranges and bananas.
One thing that I think is really fascinating about how you've been farming the last, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, but has been not with owning land, and that you've made it work. And some of our listeners might be transitioning out of the military and haven't bought their 130 acres that they want, or maybe in my situation that's unattainable at this time. So how have you kind of made that work with, and how has being a regenerative pasture-based farmer um, been sort of a help to that, just with lack of infrastructure that you might need for your sheep and things like that?
Well, there are a few dimensions to that answer and I to that question, and I'd like to answer it for me personally, but also more broadly. One of the initiatives I'm working on with Maha that we're about to go public with, and we'll be talking about in Indiana, I hope, is getting veterans on federal land so they don't have to pay for the land at all. It's free land. It's sitting there right now being neglected and desertified. It's the soils are being degraded. It has to be mowed with fossil fuels and labor and expense when it could be mowed by cows on solar panels. I mean grass, what I call God's solar panels. It's already right there. For my part, when we downsized, we rent a small place here, and so we got a pretty good deal here because it's cheap rent. It's a pretty rough house. It's kind of hard to heat. It's an 1850s house. It's only 7 acres. And but our landlady loves us because we take care of the place, and so so sometimes you can find that, sometimes you cannot. One of the reasons we sold the farm was my taxes were going higher and higher, and I was mowing fields for 7 other farms at one point, and turning down additional fields. There were a lot of fields. This was up in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont that if you don't mow them once in a while, if you don't hay them, they grow back up in shrubs, and that's less valuable. And I was like, well, why not just downsize and I could just hay other people's fields? And now I buy my hay from other farmers, but I also take my cows down the road to my cousin. I've been on this hill, our family, a long time. So we put in temporary fence posts with solar chargers, and we we go down the road with the cows and a bucket of grain, and it's kind of a little, always a little stressful because they may run off into other fields. But I have to say, in this area of Vermont where it's a little bit more of an incursion of non-traditional Vermonters, a lot of people say, well, no, we don't want your cows on our land because we want to let it rewild and let it grow back naturally, or they want to possess it and exclude it. And that starts to break down the landscape. It's fitting that I have the picture behind me. That look at the view. And if we didn't have farms, we'd have trees and you'd have no views. And the cows are part of the view. And the cows rebuild the soil. So I think that finding people who will work with you, and I do see opportunities where landholders and others want, and increasingly so as farming becomes popular and people recognize it, and young people, they are willing to entertain tenants who will undertake it. But also with a small piece of land, as you know, with things like pasture-raised poultry and pasture-raised pork, you don't need a lot of land. You can raise a lot of food on 1 acre. Cows require more space, sheep less so. But both of them can be raised on grass only, not just for the health benefits, but you don't have to buy grain. Pigs and chickens, it's a lot harder. You can't raise them on grass alone. So that's one of the reasons I do that. So my overheads are very low, and I have an old truck that's totally illegal from inspection perspective that you may have seen. You have to, there are two ways to get rich, my grandmother used to say, make more money or spend less. And farming is about spending less. So, it's a creative process and it's a journey that's more than just money. You're maybe not going to get rich in your bank account, but it's priceless what it'll do for your health. And farming also keeps you exercising every day. You don't need to go to the gym. You have to get up and go do your chores every day, even if you got the flu, by the way.
What was your history with on-farm slaughter? Do you mind diving into that for a minute, telling us a little bit about that fight that you went through in the state of Vermont?
Well, that's really how I got involved in this, all of this, and as an activist, because the state of Vermont showed up one day and told me I could no longer sell halves of beef from my farm, which we'd been doing at that point for about 20 years. And as a lawyer, they didn't know I was a lawyer. I was like, why is that? Oh, well, health and safety. And I was like, well, how is selling half of a beef different from selling a whole beef when they're both the same halves? Actually, we quartered them. And how is it helpful to compel me to take the animal in a truck and stress it out and mix it in with other cows? How is any of this beneficial? And they really couldn't answer my questions. And so I actually called a press conference and announced that I was going to continue slaughtering and selling of halves of beef in defiance of Vermont state law to prove that it was unconstitutional. And I was joined by other farmers and custom processors and itinerant slaughterers who some have been doing this for generations. And we know from USDA FSIS data and other data that nobody gets sick from my cows. Nobody's getting sick. There aren't recalls of grass-fed local cows. We do a good job. We take good care of our animals. It's in the large CAFO operations, and we start having huge recalls of 30,000 pounds or more of meat because you ground one sick cow in with all the rest of them. If you get a burger from a farmer like me, you can find out its name if you want to know. But the point of that is, and that's the other aspect of what you asked. When I started doing this about 26 years ago now, we were getting $2.40 a pound hanging for lamb. And right now, I can't meet the demand at $10 a pound hanging for lamb. That's hard to, I'm not competing with the grocery store and importing more than half of our lamb in this country from New Zealand and Australia. That's good to help their economy. I don't know how good it is for the climate and the ecosystem to be transporting it all the way from halfway around the world when I can raise it right here on my grass-fed solar panels here, or my grass solar panels. Um, More and more people are willing to pay a premium. The customer base, for those that can afford it, they will pay it. And that also includes processing fees because they want to know the animal was treated well. They want to know that the fat is good for them instead of bad, like grain fed. And they want to know it doesn't have antibiotics and hormones in it.
Well, I'm really excited about you joining us in Indiana, and I think it's going to be a really good time. And I'm excited to learn more about regenerative farming from you. So I really appreciate you joining us today and sharing just a little bit of your experience and perspective and stories from the farm. We appreciate the work that you continue to do for small farms and our local food systems. And we really look forward to having you speak at the Veterans in Farming Indiana State Meeting. To learn more about Veterans in Farming, our upcoming events, and ways to get involved, visit vetsinfarming.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, where we share resources, updates about our events, and stories from veteran farmers across the region. Farm on.